So
Yeah,
having
sure.
the ability to do commerce over your mobile phone is, we feel that it's here now and then the way of the future.
So, Patty, today we talked about conversational commerce.
I love that term. Isn't that great? Yes.
Yeah, very interesting. And of course, we had Everywhere on several years ago, but they've done so many really creative, cool things with pay by text and just a lot of other things that we discussed in this one, and kind of coined this term of conversational commerce. And so I'm really excited about that particular interview. And then I talk about follow-up. And so very practical, whether you're a sales agent or you're a manager, I talked to you about an easy system that you can use, a few steps to manage follow-up and make sure that follow-up is getting done effectively and efficiently. And then talk to us about the insiders.
And then I talk about omnichannel and, the emergence of alternatives and how, and you and James and I get into a discussion about how the industry really needs to take control of the pie, or as I put it, the wallet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, wallet share as an external threat is a really, really big deal. So
Yeah.
I want to mention here that neither Kevin nor Everywhere are in any way sponsoring or paying or doing consulting or any of those types of things. It's just an interview with a great industry expert. So with that disclaimer in mind, let's dive in.
Hey, everybody. James and I are here today with Kevin Feagan from Everywhere. How you doing today, Kevin?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, James and Patti.
Thanks for being on. I ran into some of your, I was at MWAA. And one of your folks and we kept crossing. Meet me at the registration desk. And I'd be at the one registration desk and he'd be at another one. And we kept going back and forth like this. So
you know how those things go.
Oh, yes. You know how those things are. So I was really happy that I got to sit down and talk with you all last week and line you up for this podcast, because I think, you have some interesting things going on.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. Yeah,
I know Everywhere has been on the podcast in the past. I believe your founder, Larry, was interviewed maybe 2 years ago here by us. 2 years
ago, yeah, right when I came on board. Yeah,
that's what I thought. Yeah, I thought it was a couple of years ago. This obviously is your first time on our podcast. So how about maybe you give our audience a feel for who you are, how you got into merchant acquiring and how you got to Everywhere in particular.
It's a long and boring story, Patty, but I'll try to make it quick for you. I was born into payments, so my dad got me into payments back in high school.
Really?
Started with a company called Data Transfer, and then it evolved into online data, ODC. So that crew had been together for quite some time, and we spun out a piece of technology out of that company called BluePay, which I'm sure you've heard of BluePay. A lot of your listeners, I'm sure,
Sure.
Heard of it. Been one of the most successful, ISOs or fintechs in our space for quite some time. So did everything that you could possibly think of there, to setting appointments up to executive leadership. Had a few successful exits. After that, I wanted to take a stab at not working at, my dad's company, right, or somebody, the family's company, and go out and do it on my own. So we built and sold a company called eSecure Payments with a business partner of mine. That was a ton of fun. And then I'm like, you know what? I got to get back into corporate America. So Greg Cohen, Joe Kaplan pulled me into Sage Payments, and we rebranded that to Paya. That was a pretty cool story. And then
remember that, yeah.
And then went on to FIS to kind of run their fintech division. And then right when I got there, we made that small acquisition of WorldPay. So my group got tucked into that big giant ecosystem, right? And the way I got connected to Everywhere is we were trying to find a solve for what Larry and the crew were doing here. And that's when I got connected to Larry, and he's like, you know what, why don't you come down to Austin, have a beer with me, and let's see if we can make something work. And turns out we just, I didn't choose Everywhere. I chose Larry, and it was just, it was the right fit. And then, 3 hours later, I was calling FIS saying, hey, you know what, corporate America might not be for me anymore. I want to go back and build something. So 2.5 years later, here we are.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Well, so what I would love to hear, and it's been a little while again since we had talked, with the company there, but tell us really kind of what Everywhere does. How does it work? What are some of the benefits of text to pay? How do you pitch it to people that are in our industry so they understand what you do?
Sure, yeah. So Everywhere got its name in the text to pay space, right, during COVID and all that stuff, to where contactless payments was at the tip of the spear, was at the forefront, right? But make no mind, Everywhere is a full-blown payments platform. Money in, money out, money movement, you name it. Text to pay is still our MVP, and we use that as a beachhead to get involved with certain, ISVs, ISOs, agents, you name it. But Everywhere is a full-blown acquirer and processor as well. There's a couple cool things that we're doing with identity and issuing and wallets that we'll get into in a little bit. But Yeah, I mean, things are going well. We've seen a shift coming out of COVID. People are going back to the way that, that they did business previous to that. But in select few industries, there's still a giant need for text to pay: healthcare, automotive, education, non-for-profits, things like that. And it's been a really fun ride. We've grown about 800% in the last 2 years. So it's crazy what we've been able to do.
If you don't mind, though, Kevin, maybe explain to our audience exactly what text to pay, or I believe you folks refer to it as
Pay by text.
Pay by text, right? Just, because I'm not sure everybody has a clear understanding of exactly what that is.
Sure. I'll give you an example. When you go to the doctor, right? You go to the doctor, you come in and you pay a copay with your plastic credit card, right? It's not about that, right? It's about what happens after that. There's always the post-adjudicated payment or something like that. People want to be able to communicate with their merchants a lot better, right? And we've figured out a way to do that with conversational commerce. So we'll send, a text: "Hi, Patty, how are you? This is Dr. Bob. Your bill is, $450. Please reply 1 or reply yes to use card 4111 on file." If it's your first time, we'll go in and you'll click on the link and go to the portal and enter all your stuff in. But after that, it's full transparent conversational commerce, to where it's just a yes or hit 1.
Okay. That makes it a little bit clearer.
I like that term. I like that term. I never heard that before. Conversational commerce. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, I like that
that's
term.
kind of a tagline we've used the last few years. What we learned coming out of COVID is that our customers, the merchants, really didn't know their consumers as well as they thought they did.
Yeah.
How they wanted to communicate, how they wanted to transact, things like that. So by leveraging the mobile phone, where a text message is read and responded to within 90 seconds versus an email, a phone call, snail mail, what have you, we found that that's the preferred method of communication for 85-90% of people, right? So having the ability to do commerce over your mobile phone we feel that it's here now and then the way of the future.
Hey, one other question, if I could ask real quick before we move on to the other stuff. I'm just curious, like, to what extent are you guys in the card present world? I mean, I know obviously your transactions are all card not present technically, but what I mean by that is, to what extent are you serving more, service businesses and things of that nature, which seem like an obvious fit with the pay by text versus, restaurant, retail, some of those types of things. Like, talk about that a little bit as far as the mix of verticals.
Good question, James. So again, like I said at the beginning of the pod, Everywhere is a full-blown payments provider, right? So we do card present. We have terminals that we've integrated into. We've done a couple of really cool things with the Clover device. So Clover, we do have a pay by text tender key on the Clover device, to where you could either swipe, dip, chip, or hit the pay by text for online orders or whatnot, something, and then a text will spit to their phone and they could transact that way. But we do the full gamut, right? So if you have retail customers, restaurant, retail, anything like that, we can provide the POS systems and the terminals as well. Not our bread and butter, but I mean, we feel like the way of the future is we're trying to replace those, right? So, but we're not naive. I don't think plastic or terminals are going away tomorrow. We feel they might be going away in the next 5-10 years, and that's where we feel the mobile phone is going to take over.
Yeah, that's like a whole who was that we were talking to, Patty? There was somebody we had a whole episode about this, or maybe it was a questions from the field I was doing. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I think the timeline obviously is the big variable, but that idea that we're all carrying around this computer in our pocket that's so powerful. Yeah. Do we really need a big box to tie it all together, or maybe
it's a terminal? It's a terminal. It's the way we run our lives, right? I mean, that's the way. I mean, I don't carry a wallet anymore, right? I mean, everything's in my phone. I have my ID attached to the back of it. We're all good to go.
Yeah, for sure. Let's just go back a little bit. I know we touched on the pandemic, but I'm wondering, we obviously saw a huge uptick in contactless payments during the pandemic, for example. What was the impact on your business of the pandemic? I mean, I would think you saw some really, I know you mentioned an increase, but I wasn't sure if that was over the pandemic period or not.
Yeah, no, yes and no. Our strategy was the one-to-many versus the one-to-one, but the pandemic really put us on the map, being able to do that and really get a beachhead with some of these large recognizable ISVs of the space that really didn't want to build it or buy it. Instead of they wanted to partner with it, right? So we would use the text to pay as a beachhead, show them everything else that we could do in fintech, and that's how we won a ton of that business and we're able to grow. the way that we've grown the last couple of years. Again, healthcare, automotive, non-for-profit, education, travel, you know, a lot of really cool industries that we solved the problem for with text to pay during COVID that either adopted it, kept it, and then we you know, we moved on from there. But yeah, COVID for sure put us on the map and put everybody aware of what contactless payments were and kind of what the future holds with you know, with the mobile phone.
Well, let's then segue to your latest partnership with Sunbit.
Yeah.
To provide buy now, pay later. I just find this very intriguing. Buy now, pay later on text to pay.
That's it.
Pay by text, whatever. But can you talk about how this you know, about the integration and how it works?
Yeah, sure. So the hottest buzzwords coming out of the last, I'd say, 2 years are BNPL and pay by text, right? So we figured instead of, we took the other approach, right? Instead of building it ourselves, we went out and found what we thought the market leader in BNPL. And they were really revolutionizing some verticals that we wanted to be in, automotive especially. But that now they're moving into healthcare and things like that. But it's the first BNPL solution by text out there, which is super cool. So, you know, the way it works is, I don't know if you're familiar with Care Credit or one of the big market leader, right? Yeah, Synchrony and them, great company, like I said, but you know, the application process was a bit funky. So we were able to do it via the mobile phone. You get approved in 2 minutes versus 20. You know, it's a different credit check, things like that. But then what was cool about it is the consumer knew what they were able to spend while going into the facility, whether it be a doctor's office, a vet, an automotive facility, what have you. So just the consumer was much more prepared. The merchant was much more prepared. And it's all done via our text platform. So go ahead.
So as a consumer, then I would go on and make this application before I went to the store?
Yeah, absolutely. And we would send you the text with the Sunbit application in it. You'd fill out your stuff. You'd say, okay, Patty, you've been approved for $5,000. Well, you're getting a new transmission, a new engine, whatever. Maybe you need brakes too.
Right.
Not sure, but you know, and that goes across multiple verticals. You know, your car, your vet. You know, those
all
large bills that really, those large bills that really pop up, right? I mean, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think that well, those two that you mentioned, automotive and veterinary, and I would imagine other types of healthcare, would be really logical markets. I'm sure there's some others out there you could probably
for sure. Anything patient, like heavy patient responsibility, right? So orthodontics or you know, spine and pain or cosmetic healthcare stuff, right? I mean, you know, exactly. I mean, those are all very large tickets, and sometimes the folks don't have the out of pocket cash to expense that. So this gives them a better option to do that, which we're happy about.
Yeah, you know, I would love to, I'm kind of making a detour here, but I would love to zoom out a little bit. I'm sure this is a conversation that you and Larry have had at length, but I'm just curious your thoughts on this. Like, when you talk about conversational commerce and this idea of, you know, transacting via text, messenger, right, whatever it might be.
Yep.
How far do you see that going versus the kind of mobile app experience, right? So like when you think about how, you know, so let's assume for a second, we'll talk crazy for a minute and imagine a world where there's no point of sale system. So, you know, I go to a restaurant, I go to a retail store, there is no point of sale. There's nobody manning the register. There's none of that. Like, let's just say we're in a future world and that just doesn't exist anymore. As a consumer, what am I doing on my phone? How much of it is I'm texting back and forth with an AI or with the whatever pre-created script there is for this transaction and requesting items or whatever, versus I'm opening up the mobile app and going through a mobile app experience or, you know, something like that. I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on where do you see those trends going as far as the switch to mobile phones kind of being the center of commerce?
Yeah, we've taken a long, hard look at it and did a lot of R&D on this. And people don't want more apps. I mean, everybody's got their apps, their banking apps, your Venmo, your Zelle, your Cash apps, your neobanks. You know, I got a 1-year-old, my wife's pregnant again. Those two kids are never going to set foot in the bank, right? All their commerce is going to be done through their mobile phone. That's truly what I believe. To where a lot of those apps sit behind a large institution, whether it be a big bank, or whatever. Where Everywhere, what we've done is we sit in front of those institutions, right? With we could transact just with the mobile phone, by just sending a simple text, and having a conversation. And that's where we feel, when this thing here, could replace a credit card terminal. That's the key of the future when you're talking about replacing terminals and the way that commerce is going to be done. We're betting on the phone on both sides, right? Money in, money out, and the merchants transacting that way as well. You're starting to see a lot of that with Stripe and Square and PayPal and some of that stuff. And those companies are here to stay. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, I love this whole debate. It's so interesting to me to kind of see how it's gonna play out, because it really is interesting when you see ChatGPT and all that too. I think that kind of opened everybody's eyes a little bit to like what's possible as far as a text conversation and things of that nature. So all right, well, so here's my question. So for what you have today, right? So we talk about this pay by text, and then it sounds like you've really kind of gotten your hooks in with the pay by text, and then you're able to provide full acquiring services and all of the other things. So for our audience, which is primarily ISOs and agents, obviously some fintechs out there and some ISVs and things like that, how exactly do you partner with those companies? And maybe you could talk a little bit about the economic model of why would they partner with you. So maybe you could dive into that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So we've done a couple hundred integrations and partnerships with ISOs, agents, some of the the big companies out there today that are very recognizable, right? To where they were at a crossroads. Their acquirer or their bank didn't offer what Everywhere was doing. They came to us to solve a problem. A couple ones that are public right now is Bank of America. Bank of America chose Everywhere as their pay by text solution for their 300,000 merchants, right? So it was something that Bank of America needed to solve a problem for. They didn't want to build it, they didn't want to buy it, so they partnered with Everywhere, right? So for the agent ISO model, we have a couple different ways. We're not going to cannibalize the payments revenue, right? Because technically we are an acquirer ourselves, and they could look at us as a competitor, and we didn't want to do that. So we said, okay, we're going to white label and really take a SaaS approach to the payment companies of the world, to where they can consume our APIs. They're very easily consumable. Larry and the crew did a very good job on how to inject those into their ecosystem. And really just give a buy rate. So it's a monthly SaaS buy rate, a per trans fee and a per text fee. And then we could rev share above that, 100% split above that, depending on how the economics work out, what the need for it is. But the benefit is really, their sales reps make more money. There's more residuals going to the bottom line, and it's a stickier customer, right? When you're that integrated, when you start to know your customers and your merchants start to know their customers on an intimate level, that's when those merchants turn from 12 months to 36, 48 months, right? You're getting more for your bang for your buck there. But yeah, we partner with, we're 250 plus agents, ISOs, banks, you name it out there today.
And then just to clarify, one other thing that our audience is always wondering about, talk about the processor agnostic versus in-house. So like, obviously you guys have your own processing and all of that, but let's say I'm already a Fiserv shop or whatever, and I've got my minimums to hit, and I'm selling, 200 mids a month or something like that. How would I work with you guys while still, can I work with you guys? Then how would I do that?
Yeah. Just the simple Card Connect credentials, right? Or Clover Connect now credentials, right?
Right.
So, we've integrated into the big five. We are agnostic. Like I said, we don't want to cannibalize your payments revenue. We're trying to enhance it, make a stickier merchant. So, I think 98% of platforms out there Everywhere could write to and post back on. So yeah, we knew that, Everywhere having a SaaS and a payments play, a lot of our competitors have just gone SaaS because of that reason.
Right.
We still feel that, payments and what we're doing with the mobile phone and how we're making the mobile phone number a form of payment with our identity piece and things like that is still acquiring still makes sense for us. But, in terms of cannibalizing any revenue, we don't want to do that for the acquirers or agents or ISOs in the world. So we'll just do a total SaaS play. Think of that as like an off.net model, right? To where it's just, a buy rate and whatever they sell above it is gravy for them.
Yeah, like that's a good way to put it. Actually, you're kind of like a conversational commerce gateway.
That's it.
right?
Oh, I
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
it.
I'm gonna write that one down.
Yeah, that's kind of
We
interesting.
say our tagline is, if Stripe and Twilio had a baby, that would be everywhere, right? So I mean, we have the SaaS piece on the commerce side, we have the acquiring piece, and you can take whatever chunk out of us you want. But
That's great. Yeah, I
not the
like that.
That's a
full-blown
great one. I
solution.
love it.
That's it. That's it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, man, it's really been intriguing and interesting just talking to you. I love what you guys are doing. Always am seeing good things. So for those in our audience that want to learn more, they'd like to reach out about partnering with you and learn more about the things that you're doing. Where would they go to learn more?
Yeah, so everywhere.com. We have the text widget on there. We have, multiple ways to communicate with us, but everywhere.com. You can go right to our sales team. We got a bunch of agents standing by on how to partner with agents, ISOs, and merchants themselves, right? I mean, we're
Sure.
we're signing merchants every day in all verticals, right? Can't have a name like Everywhere and only
And
single
only
out a
be in
couple.
one place.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So
That's great.
yeah, that it's really easy, and like I said, our folks are great. We're growing like crazy, but we're really here to partner with merchants and agents and ISOs and just make it a better experience, right? Really get them
Yeah.
to know their merchants better, know their customers better. And we feel like, again, we feel it's the way the future here.
I love it.
And,
So
and again,
ahead,
that's
Patty.
Everywhere. EVERYWARE.
.com,
.com.
correct. Spelled like software. Yep.
Right.
EVERYWARE.com. Yep, absolutely.
Great, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today and your insights. I really appreciate you taking the time to share them with our audience.
Yeah,
Yes.
James, Patti, it's been great. We really appreciate it.
So do I. Thank you.
Yep. Love what you guys are doing for the space. Thanks, everyone.
So, Patty, if you ask anybody in our industry about interchange relative to residual, what is the impact of interchange on residual? Almost everybody would say interchange is a negative. It is an expense, right? It hurts residuals. The higher the interchange, the lower the residuals. Now you could be doing interchange plus or whatever, but the idea is, as far as the piece of the pie that you get, interchange cuts out a big piece of that pie. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a revenue stream? So what if you made money, you made residual from the interchange? Well, to do that, you have to kind of become the bank in a way. You have to be the one doing the issuing. And that's exactly what our sponsor, Nativia Banking, provides to ISOs and agents, is the ability to sell banking services to their merchants so that when their merchants go out and spend money on these debit cards, that interchange becomes part of the calculation for residual, among other things like balances.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if you want to learn more about that, the thing I've been telling everybody to do is, this is the time. It's still early. Okay. It's still really, really early.
Yeah.
This market is
But it definitely is the future.
It's the future. And if you want to get a glimpse of it today and get started, the first step is very simple. Create your own neo-banking account with Nativia Banking. They have their own special kind of banking division they created for ISOs and agents, where you can deposit your residuals. You can get access to low-cost capital by getting advances on residuals. You can manage your residuals better. You can pay sub-agents instantly, bonuses and residuals through the Nativia network. So lots of really cool stuff for the ISOs and agents. And you can find out more about that by going to ccsalespro.com/Nativia, Netevia, ccsalespro.com/Nativia. Go check it out and open your account today. So Patty, today in questions from the field, I'm going to do one that's just really on my mind since I had a consulting session this morning about a sales team that's been struggling. And a big part of the struggle is just kind of the follow-up. And, and it's kind of this idea of just, how do we follow up? When do we follow up? How often do we follow up? How do the managers manage follow-up? And if you get this wrong, you're not going to make very many sales, because the truth of the matter is, as payments becomes more and more complex, we're seeing the one call close, which already wasn't very common, become nearly non-existent. It's very difficult to, one call close somebody on a Clover or on a vertical specific SaaS solution or whatever, or on pay by text, or, it's like, usually you got to follow up, right? So how do you do it? And I have a really simple formula. I've used it for years with success with a variety of different teams, inside, outside, etc. So I thought I would just kind of share that with everybody today.
Great.
So here you go. You ready? Number one, you need to make sure that prospects are either active in your pipeline or inactive in your pipeline. Now, this sounds obvious, right? And like most things that are important, it's going to sound obvious, but do you execute on it? Meaning, if I asked you, show me everybody who's actively in your pipeline that you are proactively trying to sell, does that list exist in some kind of digital environment, some kind of CRM solution? Or do you kind of have a big list of everybody and you're just kind of looking through it as time allows to see who you should work on?
Who should I go to today kind of
Right.
thing. Yeah.
You got to have a well-defined list. That's number one. Number two
Right.
is you have to define an active prospect as someone with what I call a next action step. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Now, a next action step is a little bit different than a task. Usually it's going to
Right.
be managed the same way as far as in your actual software itself. But the idea of a next action step is that it's very specific. We're going to have a time frame for this next action step, right? A task you don't necessarily have to have a time for it. You could just have a task that needs to be done at some point in the future.
Yeah,
But it's
sure.
going to be a certain time frame.
Right. Within the next week, whatever. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that. It could even be a lot
Yeah.
longer, but yeah, you're gonna have a time frame. You're gonna have a direct responsible person for that next action step, and you're gonna have a very specific definition of what you're going to do. So let me give you an example. If I said, I need to follow up with someone next week to see if they're interested, that's not a next action step. That sounds more like a wish list. A next action step is call Bill Tuesday afternoon to discuss the pricing proposal. That's the next action step.
That's a next step.
Very, very specific, right? And so we have to have a next action step. So every single prospect, so when I asked you, do you have your list of active versus inactive? The follow-up question would be, does every single prospect in your active list have a next action step, a clearly defined next step that you are going to take, right? One of my favorite ones, somebody will say, oh yeah, I've got next action steps. And I'll start looking at them and I'll say, what about this one? It says, Susan is going to call me next week. I'm like, that's not a next action step for you, right?
No.
And we all know, what are the odds that Susan is going to call us? Well, pretty slim.
Pretty close to zero.
Right. So the question is, what are you going to do? Obviously, if Susan calls you on Monday, well, good for you. That's great. But let's assume that she's not, right? What are you going to do next? And it's like, well, if she doesn't call me back by Tuesday, I'm going to reach out. Okay, well, should you go out there in person? Should you send an email? Did you connect on LinkedIn? Are you going to call? Are you going to text? And it's like, what are you going to do? And you're like, oh, well, I guess I would probably text her and try to set up an in-person meeting. Okay, great. We now have a next action step.
Right.
Text Susan Tuesday afternoon if she hasn't called yet to schedule an in-person meeting. We now have a next action step.
And remember, text her, do not leave a phone message.
Yes.
Just to go back to our interview earlier.
Yes. No one listens to voicemail. Very few people actually read their emails from people they don't know anymore.
I tell people all the time, it's like, do not email me. If you really need me, don't call me, don't email me, text me.
Yeah, but if it's urgent and important, send me a text, right?
Yep.
So that's that. So we have our active list. We've defined active as people with the next action step. So we make sure that each prospect has the next action step. Now here's the next one that's really important. Always set your next action step when you've completed an action step. Okay. In that moment. So when you walk out of the merchant location, in that moment, you say, okay, hold on a second. This moment right now, this is when I have the most context and the best information to determine what, if anything, I should do next. So in that moment, you start by asking a really important question, which is, are there any next action steps? Right? So if I sold them, well, now we're going to move into action steps around installation and things of that nature, but they're not on my pipeline anymore. They're probably now moving into some kind of other stage, right? So it's not part of my sales pipeline because it was closed, yes, but maybe it should be closed, no. Are they actually interested, or are they just wasting your time? You might need to pull them out of your pipeline and say, you know what, there are no next action steps. Well, there's no such thing as an active prospect without a next action step.
Without it, yeah.
That's called closed no. That means they're not interested. You did not get them. That's fine. Move on to the next one, right?
Right.
But when you have this habit where every time you walk out of the business or you get off of the phone call or you complete an action, you then in that moment say, okay, what is my next action step? And you determine that if there is one or not, you determine that first, then you put it in there. Well, this is the beautiful thing about this, Patty. If you follow that system, you never spend even a moment of your time trying to figure out what you need to do today.
Right.
Every day you log into your system, you say, well, what are the action steps that I need to do today? And you look at them on a list view if you want, and you might route your day based on that list, but you never say, oh, I feel like I'm forgetting something. You might feel like it, but you're not.
Right,
Because
right.
if you followed what I just said, you're never going to forget anything. Because if you have a next action step, you're going to complete it. And when you complete it, you're going to schedule the next one, or you're going to mark it closed. No. So you have this very clean, closed loop system for follow-up. And then the other thing I love about this, Patty, is from the manager's perspective. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
From the manager's perspective, now all of a sudden managing follow-up becomes really simple. It's only 2 things you have to do. Number one, you need to run a report that says, are there any quote unquote active prospects without a next action step? Right? If so, you just reach out to the sales agent and say, hey, I noticed you have XYZ plumbing company in here, but there's no next action step. What's going on with that? Oh, well, I was kind of waiting on them to hear back. Okay, well, what are you going to do if they don't? Well, I guess I would do, and then, okay, let's create the next action step. So enforcing, there has to be a next action step. That's number one. And then number two is you have to read the next action steps that are in there on a, once a week or whatever, do it like in a pipeline review. You say, well, people always say, well, James, what does a good pipeline review look like? Fairly simple. A pipeline review is just you reading the next action steps with the person sitting there. That's it. Like, that's all you do.
Yeah,
and you read through them and say, does that make sense? Is that a good next action step? And it's like, well, you know what? That next action step sounds more like a wish list,
Right.
I'm hoping that I'm hoping that they will reach out and sign up with me, like that's not a next action step, right? So you read through them and say, do we have robust action steps here that are going to be taken? And if we do,
and that are going to actually progress you along on your path.
Exactly. And then in those pipeline reviews as a manager, you might read something. For instance, you might read an action step that says, follow up with Bill Thursday afternoon to talk about if this point of sale or this point of sale is the right solution. That's your cue to reach out to that agent and say, hey, did you figure that out? Do you have any questions? What can we do?
Right.
So reading the next action steps will also help the manager to kind of zero in on the deals where maybe some additional involvement or support or tech support would be warranted. So follow that process as an agent. You're never going to be stressed about your follow-up. You know exactly what you need to do. That's number one. And as a manager, just make sure your team is following what I just described, and you're going to find that your follow-up is extremely efficient and productive.
So James, I wanted to, I haven't done what I used to call data dumps because I think they're too big as a rule.
Yes.
But
sure.
I do think that there's some important statistics that come out from time to time
Sure.
that help agents and ISOs, sell better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have a better, fix on the market. So I came across this week a new report out of Fiserv that finds that cost-conscious consumers are driving demand for omnichannel experiences, for retailer apps, and for embedded finance.
Okay.
Which three almost kind of disparate things in a sense, but they all do kind of come together. 59%, for just as an example, 59% or 6 out of 10 have used buy online, pick up at store in the past month. And I can tell you that was me, and I'm sure it was your wife as well, because I hate going to grocery.
Yeah, it's funny, Patty. We don't even do the
you don't even go pick up.
No, it's got to be delivery now. I'm past the pickup. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to do that anymore. It's like,
and I wish I was, but every time I do that, they're like, "You're too far outside of our
you live
zone."
in your cabin in the woods there, so that's your problem. But yeah, no, for us, we're kind of like, you know what? If you're not going to deliver it, I don't think we're going to do that.
Yeah. So so this kind of goes with that, because restaurants are the most popular places, which of course they're also the most popular places for delivery.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't you think? I mean,
absolutely.
Followed by retailers and grocery stores. It's nearly ubiquitous, they say, with millennials and Gen Z. So there we have it.
Yeah.
You being kind of sort of a millennial.
Right. Sure. I guess I'm a little bit past that. I guess I don't know. I just turned 40.
Yeah, you're kind of on that cusp,
Yeah, I'm right there. I like to think I'm a millennial. That's my mindset.
I know you do. Maybe we'll call you Gen Z just for the heck of it.
Yeah, just to make it even seem younger, right? So
I have a cousin who's she's a little bit older than you, and when she was living with us, she used to say, "I'm Gen Y for why me."
Yeah, there you go. Right. Right.
So,
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting though when you think about, Patty, like, I'm always in shock when I see the early 20-something team members we have here at CC Sales Pro in the building when they DoorDash McDonald's or Wendy's and you're like,
Doesn't that
And,
make
and you have to understand, I mean, you can literally see it from the building.
I
mean, it's like
know. I've been
there,
in
it's
your
right
offices.
there,
It's
you
like
know.
right across the field.
But it's like, no, we're gonna get that delivered. And it's like, wow, so yeah, I think it definitely that's the trends are increasing the younger.
Or they definitely are. My 17 and 22-year-old niece and nephew are fond of ordering ice cream to be delivered.
I am guilty of that one. I will say there's actually
to me, it's like, guys, isn't it half melted by the time it gets to you?
Yeah, we're guilty of the door dashing Dairy Queen. It happens to be close enough to the house that if we want a little ice cream thing, and we got the babies, and it's just me at the
Well,
house.
you do have the babies. I mean, that's a lot to put everybody into the car. I mean, my parents used to do that with us, and it was a pain.
It's a little melty, but you just got to live with it, and for the trade off of the convenience. So.
Right. Okay, so let's get back to some of my stats.
Yes.
Consumers really big into comparison shopping. 46% of consumers who ordered from a retailer app had already searched on a third-party app.
Wow, that's interesting.
That's very interesting, I think,
Yeah.
When shopping via apps, 44% of consumers say they prefer the retailer apps over third-party apps.
Sure.
Because they tend to offer better pricing.
Interesting. I prefer them because they seem to be less of a hassle. Like
that's my preference too. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, we'll do it. Like, it is interesting. I was thinking about that. I'm like, I actually have done the purchase on the app and then pick up at the store with what is the electronics place? I read all of a sudden.
Best Buy.
Yeah, I do that with Best Buy a lot for any of our company type stuff or tech stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. So obviously ease of use is a really important attribute for an app. Followed by ability to pay in app, integration with loyalty programs, and as you said, ability to pick up at store or to have it delivered.
Yeah.
The Fiserv survey, which was based on an April survey of 2,200 adult Americans, also explored this trend towards embedded finance, which I find really intriguing, the whole concept of embedded finance.
Yeah.
Basically, embedded finance is the integration of financial products with a non-financial customer experience. So, think of buy now, pay later, or online food ordering, so two popular opportunities for embedded finance, according to Fiserv, include instant issuance of digital cards at checkout and the ability for consumers to choose their bank accounts as a payment option. Now, this goes back to what we discussed about Zelle and FedNow and,
right.
that whole thing. And I was really surprised. 34% had used a pay by bank option at a merchant checkout in the last year.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually really interesting. I'm trying to think of how that would even work. What is that when they say pay by bank?
Because you're using in my mind, the way that would work is you're paying by Venmo or Zelle.
I guess I didn't even realize. See, I am not a big Venmo or Zelle, even Cash App. For some reason, I've just never really gotten into that.
Cash App, I don't even understand, but Venmo and Zelle, I do use. I prefer Venmo just because it's easier. But
and so a lot of merchants are accepting that now.
I'm surprised. Yeah, I was driving my young niece to work a couple months ago, and she's like, "Hey, can we stop at such and such a sandwich shop on the way?" I'm like, "Okay." She's like, "You think they'll take Venmo?" Like, well, if they don't, I guess I'll cover your sandwich for you.
Right.
But I said, do a lot of merchants? Oh yeah, where she goes to school, all the local merchants take Venmo because the kids all, I know
we've seen that trend. I mean, even in a lot of the popular terminals now have have this option to be able to accept Venmo or Zelle on the device, as a separate button you can click and then they can do their Zelle or Venmo.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons, pay by bank is going to become popular, more popular. I mean, right now they say high income earners are the biggest users, but I think it's going to go down market as consumers, their preferences, as they describe the reasons for liking it in descending order, it's the consumer protections, the debt avoidance, and the ease of use.
Yeah. I think Just an interesting, I think on our show today, we've talked about two of what I consider to be the most interesting trends. One of them is this whole mobile phone thing and how that's
Right.
going to play,
Right.
relative to the point of sale. But the other one I think that always shocks me a little bit is, as an industry, we've been so focused on the external threat of other card processing providers,
Right.
but we just haven't really been. I've talked about it many times, but we just haven't. Nobody I talk to in our industry is talking to me about our share of the pie. Nobody's talking about DoorDash is eating into my residuals, or Uber Eats, or Zelle, or Venmo, or whatever. And I think what's interesting is I feel like I'm not sure which of those threats actually scares me more, because I think what's interesting to me is the external stuff. It seems more solvable. It seems more like, well, as long as we get into software as well, we can pivot, we can transition. But it's like, what do we do about the fact that we don't make any money on Zelle and Venmo? I don't really know what to do about that yet. You know what I mean? Or DoorDash or Uber Eats. Like, I know we could all, they can offer their own, but it's like, that's an interesting trend of like our pie is getting smaller,
It is. And I think, you talk about Venmo and Zelle, and as we've said before, FedNow. I mean,
Right.
FedNow is really I think it's going to sideline Venmo and Zelle to a certain extent.
Or it'll be the rails that they run on.
Or it'll be the rails that they run on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Exactly.
but I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the whole thing plays out, just as far as piece of the pie. I think and again, it's another reason why I'm so bullish on getting into software.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
As you're getting into the software play, you can make money on the software and not just the payment.
Pie's bigger.
Yeah. And so you at least if you own the software, at least you control the pie. Exactly. So you're like, well, we need to make Venmo and Zelle acceptance available because of the vertical we're serving. Well, sure, right? We get that. But you could say, well, we're charging $10 a month for Venmo and Zelle acceptance or whatever. Like, you control that pie. And I think that's just really important.
Yeah, I think you're right. So anyway, my bottom line here, I think the message that, we've just discussed is that there's lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
We just have to make sure we place the right bets.
Yeah. Good stuff, Patti. Very thought-provoking. Thanks.